How do we know that this is real and not the Matrix? Is there a God? Could a machine think? What makes things right or wrong? Could I become a robot? Could I switch bodies with another person's? So we're always vulnerable, and we're all vulnerable. It's not as if any of us are completely immune to this sort of thing. But you can also be seduced into sometimes quite toxic belief systems. What you thought was just obvious and common sense, oh dear, maybe it's not even true. As we become increasingly immersed in the world of bullshit, it's increasingly important that we have some awareness of how others are going to try to manipulate us and potentially lead us astray.
Today, we're stepping into the world of critical thinking, reason, and the big philosophical questions with one of the most accessible and compelling minds in modern philosophy, Dr. Stephen Law. A renowned philosopher, author, and senior lecturer at the University of London, Stephen is widely known for making complex ideas approachable, from ethics and metaphysics to religion and skepticism. His books, including The Philosophy Gym and Believing Bullshit, amongst other publications, challenge us to think more clearly, question more deeply, and resist the lure of lazy logic. In this episode, we explore the power of philosophical inquiry in an age of misinformation, why doubt is essential to truth, and how philosophy can be a tool for everyday life. Get ready for a conversation that doesn't just ask what we believe, but why we believe it. Take a listen. Thanks for your interest in sticking around to watch or listen to my podcast, dedicated to providing tools and resources to help you claim and live your best life. If you're loving these conversations, make sure you hit that bell to subscribe or follow and never miss an episode of the Chris Senise Podcast. Don't forget to tap the like and share it with someone who needs a little inspiration today. Let's grow this community of curious, driven minds together. I think you had questions originally about what you could offer on this episode. This one's going to be on belief systems and how we are trained, conditioned, whatever the term would be, I guess early in life at any point in time that would lead us to go on certain paths, follow certain directions that basically paved the way for our entire lives.
Yeah, I can talk about that kind of stuff. I think it can happen very early on, so you can indoctrinate young children clearly into a particular religious or political perspective in which they'll be very often stuck for the rest of their lives. The concrete sets and that's it, they're not coming out. But you can also be seduced into sometimes quite toxic belief systems much later on in life. So we're always vulnerable, and we're all vulnerable. It's not as if any of us are completely immune to this sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up not being a psychologist, because my professional backgrounds are finance and I'm a musician, so nothing to do with these topics.
Okay.
But I'm
almost a musician because I'm a drummer.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I always find being a musician interesting because, for example, my parents are not musical at all, but they are both accountants. So I guess some of that rubbed off, but I'm not a psychologist either, but I am so interested in the human spirit, how we work, what makes it tick. How we react, I think, is a big one, because I think we are generally in a reactive state. But, I launched this podcast just because I guess I'm interested in people and like talking to them, and think I have all the same questions everybody else has.
Yeah, good.
That's been your path as well, correct?
Yeah, I have a slightly unusual background really for a philosopher. So I was kicked out of school. And I don't have any A-levels, which is what you would normally expect someone to have going into university. So I worked as various menial jobs. I was a postman actually for 4 years. Then I discovered philosophy. I realized that you could actually go to university and study, questions such as how do we know that this is real and not the Matrix, for example?
Mhm.
Is there a
Mhm.
God? Could a machine think? What makes things right or wrong?
Right.
Could I become a robot? Could I switch bodies with another person? And so on. These kind of questions. I loved those kind of questions in my early 20s. And once I realised you could actually go to university and think about these things, well, that was it. That's what I wanted to do. And so by some miracle, I actually managed to persuade a university to accept me. And really, I've just never left. I'm now mid-60s and I'm still doing it. Yeah.
I do believe that life is a classroom. I I love to learn. I love to explore. But you've continued doing that beyond and beyond and beyond
Yes.
the
Yeah.
technical classroom, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I've been an academic for a long
Hmm.
time. Yeah. So I went to City University, did very well. Then I went to Oxford University. I did my doctorate at Oxford. I was a research fellow at Oxford. Then I taught in London for 20 years. Now I'm back doing some stuff for Oxford.
Hmm.
So I've been very fortunate indeed, really. There's been a lot of luck involved. And I've also written a lot of um, popular books on philosophy,
Hmm.
sort of introducing people to philosophy, philosophical questions, critical thinking, bullshit, and how to spot it,
Hmm.
and some books for young people as well. I read a book called The Complete Philosophy Files, which has
Hmm.
cartoons in it for sort of age 11 and up. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I kind of feel like it's important to make philosophy accessible to everyone
Hmm.
if they're interested. I
Hmm.
also edit a journal for the Royal Institute of Philosophy called Think Philosophy for Everyone, in fact.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I'm a kind of a popularizer
I
as well.
noticed.
Yeah.
I noticed. Is there a specific reason why you chose an age group to write a book for?
Well, when I wrote the Complete Philosophy Files, as it's known now,
Yes.
the the reason I wrote it, I think, is partly because I'm a very visual thinker. I tend to think in terms of images, and so it came very naturally to me to start wanting to write things with pictures. I just found that attractive. Plus, I also felt that there weren't any books written for the kind of person that I was before I discovered sort of academic philosophy. There were no good introductions, really. It was a wilderness, really. There was nothing there. So I thought I would write a book of the sort that I would have enjoyed.
Hmm.
And so often introductions to philosophy tend to be very historical, and this philosopher said this and that philosopher said that. I thought that would be very off-putting, so I based it around questions instead. So questions like should I eat meat? Is it morally acceptable to kill animals and eat them? Because there are a lot of arguments for and
Hmm.
against. So I
Right.
thought I can explore those, for at a level that kids are going to understand, because kids spontaneously ask these questions anyway, right? They're
Agreed.
just spontaneously interested in them. Or, how can I know that this is real and I'm not embedded in the matrix? Could a machine think? These kind of questions are just questions that kids love anyway.
Hmm.
Um, so, it then wasn't difficult to write, a children's book, just exploring those kind of questions with dialogues and images and so on. So that's what I did. And really, I was writing it for myself, my sort of earlier self. Yeah. And I feel that it's been pretty successful, translated into many languages and so on. And I have often come across people who study philosophy at university who first got into philosophy because of my book. So I've the philosopher Socrates in ancient Greece was famously accused of corrupting the youth. Well, I've certainly done my bit.
You've done your part.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a great angle to start from. I mean, even in my podcast, it's just a bunch of questions that I have, and I assume other people would have too. So I'm just like, well, we could do it together, right? I'll just ask a bunch of random questions that I think other people would have as well. I mean, I literally go in my own direction, right? These are my questions, but I think
Yeah.
it's very similar to why you would write something for younger people who have questions that, would you say sometimes they're not even questions you say out loud? It's just thoughts in your own head.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, not everyone, not everyone is interested in asking these kind of questions. And in fact, to some extent, they're kind of scary,
Mm-hmm.
actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if well, kids will ask why, and then you'll give them an answer, yeah, and then they'll go, yeah, but why that? And then and they just keep digging, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't take that long very often before we kind of run out of steam and we don't have any answers anymore, and they've kind of hit bedrock, and then we're in trouble. So the tempting thing to say is, stop asking stupid questions, or this is just ridiculous. Go away and play football or
Mm-hmm.
something. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas actually, I kind of enjoy that sense of vertigo that you get when suddenly what you thought was the firm ground beneath your feet turns out not to be there at all, and you're kind of just hanging in the air. What you
Mm-hmm.
thought was just obvious and common sense. Oh dear, maybe it's not even true.
Right.
That's a very disconcerting and slightly scary thought, and I enjoy the fear a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like climbing because I like climbing. I just got back from the Alps. I like being in an environment where you kind of you feel a little bit on edge, and you can't just take it for granted that everything's going to be fine and everything's okay. So I think that's maybe, I don't know, I'm just making this up as I go along, but I suspect that there's an element of that in philosophy that I find attractive also. It's like it's edgy thinking that can get you into trouble if you don't watch it.
Would you consider that to be conditional thinking as well? Or is that just like a term that's been coined that we
I don't know
just
what that
throw
means.
around?
What is that? What is conditional thinking?
Conditional thinking is basically what you have been conditioned to think, right? Not
Okay.
necessarily like somebody else's, I suppose, philosophy, right? That is created to control, if you'd
Yeah,
say. Right.
yeah,
Because
and
it's better for someone else to do that, is to control
yeah,
someone's
yeah,
thinking. Mm-hmm.
and no one wants to be other people's puppet.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yet
one of
there's
the
always someone trying to be the puppeteer.
true, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be on your guard. You need some kind of ninja tools of self-defense, don't you? You need to be able to spot when people are beginning to pull your strings or manipulate you in various ways, or mislead you or
Mm-hmm.
feed you dodgy arguments and so on. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to be aware. You need to have some self-awareness also that you are vulnerable to these things. I mean, we
Right.
have kind of we've got built-in vulnerabilities
Sure.
actually. They've even been identified. So
Mm-hmm.
we know that there are various cognitive biases, as they're known, to which we're all prone, and other people will take advantage of those and use them to
Mm-hmm.
manipulate us. So knowing your own vulnerabilities is also um, important. So yeah, I think perhaps you could argue that as we become increasingly immersed in a world of bullshit on the
Mm-hmm.
internet and within
Mm-hmm.
politics and so on, it's increasingly important that we have some
Mm-hmm.
awareness of how others are going to try to manipulate us and potentially lead us astray to their own benefit. Yeah.
I'd
So,
agree with
and,
that.
and nothing really does that better than philosophy, because philosophy is basically critical thinking,
Yes.
about big questions, including, moral and political and so on. And kind of digging down and excavating and figuring out what's basically true. What are the basic principles? What can we sign up to? And very often, once you start sort of probing what you've previously taken for granted, you find it all starts coming apart, and what you thought was the foundation for your life is disintegrating, and you're going to need to come up with something a bit better than that. And
Right.
um, I think that's very often a a good thing, actually. A bit scary,
Yeah,
but it's a healthy thing. Yeah.
I'd agree. I was definitely that child that just continued to ask why, just
Yeah.
never being satisfied with the response until the response became because I said so.
Mm.
And I think that's very limiting, especially as a child. I love my parents, don't get me wrong. I do love my parents for how they raised me, but I was just that kid. And then eventually it was just like, I don't know if it's that they were out of answers and they
Yeah.
were like, because I said so. And then you combine that with, religion, what you're taught in school, I guess tribal knowledge going back generations, right?
Yeah.
It's what they were taught. If they were asking why, it was
Yeah.
they were getting the response of, I'm out of questions because I said so. I'm out of answers because I said so. Um, I, I think that's incredibly limiting versus just saying, go look it up. I mean, especially now, go Google it. I don't know. If I don't have the answer, I could just tell my kids to go Google it.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, yeah. I mean, raising children to be sort of critical, self-critical, reflective, um, thinking about things from other perspectives,
Hmm.
trying to put yourself into the mind of another person and try and understand how things seem from over there,
Hmm.
perhaps very different. These are very important skills. I'll give you one reason why.
Hmm.
Um, Research has been done into the backgrounds of people who rescued Jews during the Holocaust, for example. And what was discovered, it's often said that, oh, yes, it was religion. Religion is what inspired people to do the right thing under the most difficult of circumstances. Well, religion had some small effect, but not very much. What really marks out the rescuers from the non-rescuers, it turns out, is that they had been brought up differently. They had been brought up to think, question, debate, have empathy with other people, put themselves imaginatively in the perspectives of other people, have those kind of conversations over the dinner table with parents and so on.
Yeah.
So they didn't just passively accept, and they didn't just do what they were told. They took responsibility and they thought about things for themselves and made their own judgments. Those are the people that do the right thing
Hmm.
when things get difficult. So if you want to raise young people to have some immunity to these kind of moral catastrophes, you
Hmm.
need to raise them like that.
Hmm.
Religion doesn't really matter that much,
Uh-huh.
but be religious, raise them with in a religious framework if you like, but make sure
Hmm.
they don't just uncritically accept it. Make sure they're not just passive receptacles. Make sure that they are encouraged to think for themselves and make their own judgment, and maybe they'll decide they don't believe,
Yeah.
which tough. You'll have to
Yeah.
accept that. That's really how you raise, it seems to me, good citizens. And the people that encourage young people to defer to authority, to uncritically
Yeah.
accept and so on, those people are raising kind of moral sheep.
Sheep.
You know,
Sheeple.
the flock. Yeah, the sheep will. They may do the right thing. Though, if you've got a leader
Hmm.
that's telling them to do the right thing, they'll do the right thing. But if some more pernicious
Black
person
sheep.
comes along, black sheep comes along,
Black sheep.
these people they have no immunity. They're just going to follow, right, whoever is the charismatic figurehead of the moment, and they'll just more or less passively accept and do whatever it is that they're told, and they could be led down a very dark path. Do not raise a society of moral sheep. It can be very, it can be very nice. They're all picking up litter and not behaving themselves for the most part. But boy, that can go very wrong very rapidly
Hmm.
with a change of authority figure. So you need to raise people to have some immunity to that. People often say, "Oh yeah, if you don't want people to be indoctrinated and fed with toxic ideologies, you need to kind of get your belief system in there first. Let's figure out what we believe. British values. whatever they are. Let's figure out what those are, and then we'll teach the kids those, and then that'll be sorted and they'll be protected. No. You're laying you're sowing the seeds of disaster there. What you need to do is give them some immunity to just passively accepting what they've been told. That's what you need to do. And that's very often what we have, I think, failed to do. It's risky, of course, because, we're letting them make their own minds up, and maybe they'll disagree with us. Yeah. But at least we can still reach them, and we can use arguments to persuade them. The risk is that they'll use arguments back and show us that we're wrong, but that's just tough. Maybe we are. Maybe we'll. That's the beauty of reason and engaging in reasoned dialogue is that it's a double-edged sword, right? It cuts both ways. Yeah. So if I give you an argument that you should believe this, you can give me another argument that says that my argument's no good, and in fact you shouldn't believe this, and I might go, oh, actually, you're right, you've made a good point, and I might now have to change my mind. So reason doesn't favour my views over yours, or yours over mine. It just favours the truth. That's the beauty of reason. Whereas, and that's one reason that some educators aren't too keen on it. Precisely that reason. There are other mechanisms available to us. If I want to shape your beliefs, I could do this. I could give you some things, a list of do's and don'ts, or things to believe, and then I could say, repeat this every day.
Rules.
Every morning, I want you to recite this over and over again, and I'm going to surround you with people who are also reciting this, who believe the same things, and I'm going to associate these things that I'm getting you to recite with lots of feel-good imagery, cuddly imagery, sunlight and rainbows, and the people that hold different views, I'm going to present them in horrible, horrific imagery and scary images and so on, and in that way, by perhaps also making sure that you don't get to hear about other points of view, taking those out of the library and so on, I can really very effectively control what you think. But the thing about these mechanisms, even though they're very effective, is they're completely insensitive to the truth. They work just as well. I could just as easily get you to believe that the sun goes around the earth as that the earth goes around the sun. It's irrelevant what the truth is. These mechanisms work just as well.
Right.
Whereas reason, it's risky because you might show me that I'm wrong. It's not a one-way street. We both now can use reason, and reason just favours the truth, right? So I think that it's very important that young people be raised to use reason, encouraged to use reason, their own powers of reason, and that we don't just treat them as passive receptacles that we get to recite something in the morning, allegiance to the flag, allegiance to the Communist Party, prayers, whatever it might have to be, that we don't just expose them to imagery of scary images of. Right. I went to Iran not that long ago and saw the murals of America and Obama as a devil and so on. They were very good at using that kind of imagery, but of course the church uses that kind of imagery
as well
all the time. These mechanisms work just as well whether the belief is true or false. So to the extent that you're relying on those, you're drifting. Well, in fact, Kathleen Taylor, who wrote a book on brainwashing, says that basically that's what brainwashing is. You're just using these other mechanisms in a really determined way. Go to some Islamic, in that cases, camp or a cult or whatever it may happen to be. This is what they do. They isolate you, take you away from your family. They get you to repeat stuff over and over. They emotionally manipulate you. All of this works extremely well, very effective mechanisms. And you can really, brainwash people at the end of the day, by taking reason out of the mix and just using those mechanisms. So that's what we should definitely not do, in my opinion.
Definitely.
So I'm going on way too long here. I'll stop.
Oh, no, not at all.
Let's talk about something else.
It's a platform for you to speak where your beliefs come from, even if there truly aren't any. You're just digging deep on every topic that comes your way, it sounds like, right? You spent your life doing that? Questioning everything?
Well, some of it.
Some of it.
I mean, you'd go mad if you did it all the time, wouldn't you? So I also go and play the drums or climb a mountain or something. I do other things.
Like
as well.
mountains?
Climb mountains, yeah, I like
You
climbing. I just
climb
got back from
mountains?
the Dubai Alps. It was great.
Sounds beautiful.
Yeah, in
I don't
Austria.
know about the climbing part. Maybe I would hike it, but do you
Yeah,
actually like
yeah,
climb
with
it?
ropes and stuff. Yeah,
Oh, I'm not
yeah.
there yet. I'm from flat Florida. I go to the
Okay.
mountains a lot, but I take the safe trails. See, that's another thing. I
That's a
think sometimes this conventional thinking of ours actually comes from perhaps being if you think about your parents and their role of keeping you safe and secure, and then that potentially just has you accepting things as they're told to you, whether you want to call that control or not. But I feel that's a vulnerability that keeps people from just asking questions and questioning the world and questioning everything that comes their way. I feel like I ask why about everything. Why is that? Like I'm literally that person.
well, that's good. That's I think that's a healthy thing.
I
Um,
I I think so too. I mean, I sometimes there would be a time where I would just accept something that's being explained to me
yeah,
and
of course.
be like, okay, but it has to make sense to me. Like I'm about
Yeah,
common sense, not necessarily things that can be taught in a classroom,
yeah.
but does
I
it
mean,
make sense? And some things don't have to make sense, but
it's still
there's
worth
like
thinking about. Yeah,
point of
still worth thinking
satisfaction.
about it.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, there is. I mean, obviously, I don't think you should. I mean, I don't think if I'm learning chemistry and I'm in school, it's perfectly reasonable to just take the word of the professor,
Hmm.
teacher, because they're the
Hmm.
expert and they know.
Right.
You know, and for that reason, if they tell me to do something, I don't know, put a lump of potassium down the sink and flush it away or something, and there's an explosion and somebody gets badly injured, I can say, but I was only following orders.
There
It's
you
perfectly
go.
legitimate. I wasn't in a position to know that this would happen. I was just doing what I was told. But that's not true actually when it comes to morality
Hmm.
and sort of religion.
Hmm.
Um, if I'm a teenager and my local self-styled religious moral authority tells me to do something very bad and I do it, I can't say I was only following orders. There's a kind of boomerang-like quality to moral responsibility where you can try
Hmm.
and throw it to somebody else and say, "Oh, you make the decisions for me. You
Hmm.
take the responsibility. I'll just do what you, the expert, tell me
Told
to
me to
do."
do. Hmm.
But the truth is that you can. It always comes back to you. There's always the question: actually, should I be doing what this person is telling me to do? The
Hmm.
responsibility is yours and yours alone, and you cannot avoid it. So, morality is not like chemistry.
No.
Um, and that's one of the reasons why we should raise people to realise that it is their responsibility
Hmm.
to make these kind of decisions and judgments, and not just passively accept what their local Communist Party official or rabbi or imam or the
Hmm.
Pope, whoever it may happen to be,
Right.
tells them. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm. Just think for yourself. And I do
yeah,
believe that there's a point, even if, let's say, you were raised to think a certain way, eventually you leave the nest
mm,
and develop your own skills, meet people, learn. You're always free to learn in most places. And there just comes a point where you are responsible for your actions and what you do and don't do. I don't think that there is a person, circumstance, or anything that you can blame for a very long time. Like at some point, it's your own doing or not doing.
yeah,
But there are a lot of people that will blame others and their circumstances for the way things
yeah,
are, and I just don't think they've dug deep enough, even in themselves, to be able to not do that anymore.
yeah, yeah. I think it's a good philosophy for life to encourage people to take responsibility and think actually this is this is your choice, this is your decision, and you have to make it. You can't play
Yeah.
it. I like that as philosophy. At the same time, I am aware that many people are raised in situations I mean, I have a very privileged life. I have got lots of time to think about this stuff. I'm encouraged to think about this stuff. My parents encourage me to think about this stuff. But if you're if you're in a very different kind of situation,
Yeah.
it can be very, very difficult to even find the
Sure.
time to start having these kind of thoughts, or really seriously taking responsibility. You just kind of go with the flow, and to some extent, I can forgive that. I Yeah. So I don't want to do too much finger pointing, but when it comes to me, I feel like, yeah, the buck stops here, right? And
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, I can't kind of offload a responsibility and say, oh well, it's because of my terrible upbringing, or well, it's not.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know of someone specifically that comes to mind who was raised in a very, just to keep it as sanitized as possible. I won't be saying what religion it is, but everything was about this religion, whether it wasn't just Sundays, it was literally every day, and everyone married within that religion, and all of your friends were within that religion. And when he started to question things, obviously everyone was trying to for him to be better. And he just started to pull away, didn't agree with anything. And it was very difficult because he
Mm,
lost his family, he lost
yeah.
the friends he'd always had, and but questioned things on his own. And I don't think a lot of people have that level of strength when they're that
It
tied
is.
in.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
I agree.
but that was his experience, and I mean, he'll talk about it and talk about it, talk about it, because he probably pulled away when he was like 30 years old, and
Mm,
but it had been his whole life. And so to
mm,
see how he speaks, thinks, and explains it today is to me pretty remarkable, because I if you're raised that way, it's and you're there until you're 30 years old,
mm,
that is a he's got a really incredible story. Should have him on the podcast. But
yeah.
he's got a really incredible story, but I think that there just takes an enormous amount of strength to walk
Yeah.
away from something. Not just to walk away from it, but to think outside of everything you've been taught and how
Yeah.
you've been raised, and even as an adult what that life looked like. Uh but he did do it, and he's got a pretty remarkable story on how he
Yeah.
did that.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be very, very difficult to. There's this.
Mhm.
I said I'm not a psychologist, and I have no expertise really in that. But there
Nor
is
am
this
I.
idea in psychology of it's
Mhm.
called cognitive dissonance.
Mhm.
And so I mean, you and I can change our minds about stuff very easily if it's kind of
Mhm.
trivia, right?
Mhm.
I say um, the Matterhorn is near Chamonix, and you say no, Stephen, that's wrong. It's near Zermatt. And I'll
Right.
go, yeah, no, you're right. I've made a mistake. I'll just changing my belief. It's
Right.
simple, right? And the reason
Mhm.
it's simple is because I've got no investment in it. Whereas other times, we've invested a lot in beliefs. So for
Mhm.
example, maybe I've spent my entire career promoting cigarettes, advertising cigarettes, and then somebody comes to me with some evidence that cigarettes cause cancer.
Okay.
Now I'm in a really difficult situation because on the one hand there's this evidence, and on the other hand I've got this commitment to a belief. I've invested my whole life in something.
It's a good one.
Really, really difficult situation. Something's got to give. And very often the easiest thing to do is to start dismissing the evidence. So, no, no, sorry, this evidence is not reliable. This evidence, there's something wrong with it. The people that came up with this evidence, they're not to be trusted.
Mhm.
Because you've got so much invested already. Or
Right.
if somebody comes to me with evidence that my wife is a serial killer, it could be pretty conclusive. But
I
I'm
don't
it's going
know what's that laugh about.
to This hasn't happened. But boy, am I going to be hard to persuade. I mean, this actually happened, didn't it? With
Yeah.
there was the wife or partner of a serial killer. She just could not believe. She couldn't because she'd
Sure.
invested so much in this personal relationship. Or if you've spent your entire life within a community that's religious, and you've invested money and you've invested emotionally, and your entire social calendar is constructed around this. Boy, is it if somebody comes with evidence at you with evidence that it's not true, boy,
Hmm.
you're going to find it difficult. And so the easiest thing to do is to start explaining away the evidence. So,
Sure.
or politics is another one of these examples. You know, I have fairly strong political views, and if somebody comes to me with evidence that suggests that I'm mistaken, I'm going to be extremely resistant. I'm going to say, no, 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 this is all rubbish. This evidence can't be trusted. I'll dismiss it. I'll ignore it. In one way or another, I'll make it go away.
Hmm.
That's that's one of the key signs that you've kind of fallen into what I call an intellectual black hole. You know, black holes out in space, gravitationally very powerful. If you
Yeah.
get too close, you get sucked in,
Uh-huh.
never to escape. You go over the event horizon, as it's known. Well, there are belief systems like that in our environments.
Hmm.
Some are religious, some are
Hmm.
political. You get too close, you know, you're walking down the high street and somebody says, have you heard the good news or whatever it might happen to be? And before
Yeah.
you know it, you're starting to be drawn in,
Sucked
and
in.
there comes a point where you ain't ever coming out probably.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's very hard to escape these things. I don't know where I'm going with this thought now. I'm just kind of agreeing with you that, yeah, sometimes it's very difficult to escape these kind of belief systems. And we're all vulnerable. And sometimes some of the most intelligent people fall into them. So,
Yeah.
for example, you know, you'll be familiar with Sherlock Holmes, the fictional character, obviously, but quintessentially rational individual who was created by Arthur Conan Doyle, the
Okay.
writer, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, very intelligent man. He created a very intelligent character. Arthur
Hmm.
Conan Doyle believed in fairies, and he was successfully scammed by two little girls into
Oh.
thinking that they had taken photographs of fairies, looking up the Cottingley fairies as they're known. Um, because he wanted to believe it. He was just kind of into spiritualism and so on. He wanted it to be true. He'd invested a lot in this kind of supernatural stuff, and they got him. He fell in there. But he was the guy that had created Sherlock Holmes, the guy that was so careful about weighing up the evidence and so on. So we're all vulnerable.
Right.
In fact, sometimes the most intelligent of us, what we do is we just get really good at explaining away the evidence. We're just like really clever at it and come up with really ingenious ways of dismissing the evidence against what we believe.
So would
So
you say it's dismissing evidence or justifying what we want to believe? Right? Because it's
a bit
like
of
when you
both.
get sucked in and you're in too deep,
Yeah.
do we, like the wife who has a serial killer husband, right?
Mm.
It's far more convenient to justify, oh, there's no possible way. I know him so
Mm.
well, you know?
Yeah, well, two things can go on. So first of all, when it comes to the evidence against what you believe, you can start explaining it away,
Sure.
and it doesn't matter how ludicrous the belief, you can always do that. I mean, so suppose I believe that dogs are spies from the planet Venus, planning an imminent Venusian
Hmm.
invasion of the Earth, right? You may
Right.
say, well, but dogs can't even speak, Stephen. And I say, no, but they can speak, but they're just very, very clever and they keep their ability to speak from us. You may say, but, Stephen, how do they communicate with Venus? And I say, well, they've got transmitters. And you say, well, I've searched the dog's basket. There's no transmitter in there. I say the transmitters are located in their
Brain.
in their heads, right? And you say, well, we've scanned the dog's head and there's no transmitter in there. I say, yeah, it's made out of special stuff that you can't detect using our kind of technology. And you say, but we've scanned the outside of the dog's head. Nothing's coming out. No signals are coming out. I say they're transmitting on a frequency that's beyond our ability to detect it. Remember, these are very advanced aliens. You say, but
Hmm.
Venus is covered in clouds of sulfuric acid. No dog could possibly survive. I say they live in deep underground bunkers that protect them from the Venusian atmosphere. So I can play this game forever. And you would rightly suspect that I was suffering from some sort of mental illness, probably, if I did that. But the fact is, I can square my belief with the available evidence, given enough ingenuity and enough time to cook up explanations. So any belief, no matter how ludicrous, can be made consistent with the evidence. And it's important to realise that doesn't mean that it's supported by the evidence. It's not. All of the evidence points to dogs being benign earthbound pets, not Venusian invaders, right? The mere fact that I can square my belief with the evidence doesn't mean it's well supported by the evidence. But very often the people that believe in bullshit, this is what they do. This is exactly the game they play. They find ways to just endlessly explain away the evidence, square the evidence with what they've already committed themselves to whatever they've already invested a great deal in. This is true, for example, of young Earth creationists, of which you have many, I believe, in the United States of America. The guys that believe that the entire universe is less than 10,000 years old and that God made the planet Earth and all of the species in more or less their current form, right? Just because that's what it says in Genesis.
Right.
So they believe that. And then when you point to evidence that the universe is actually not 6,000 years old, but many, many billions of years old, when you point to evidence of evolution and so on, they're just really good at cooking up the fossil record, for example. They're really good at just explaining that away. So they'll say, for example, they say, oh yeah, all of those layers with the fossils in, right, that was produced by the flood, you know, in the Bible. The flood, Noah floated his ark on the... There was a big flood and fountains of the deep opened up. Look it up, it's in the Bible. And that produced a lot of mud and that drowned a lot of creatures, and they were buried in the sedimentary layers that were rapidly laid down. And of course the creatures at the bottom of the sea, the simple sea life, that was buried first. So they're in the lower levels. And human beings, they would be buried last because they had the most intelligence to avoid being drowned until the very last minute. And then, you know, the other creatures would be buried in layers depending on which ecological zone was flooded at which time. So they cook up these amazing explanations for things like the fossil record. And they say, voila, my theory fits the evidence. It's just as good as your theory that says that the Earth is billions of years old and that life has evolved over many millions of years. It's a very, very common strategy. So when you see people doing that, you should be very cautious. But the most important thing is watch out that you're not doing it yourself, because we all do it to some extent. We all, you know, I've got political views. Somebody comes up with some evidence against it. I'm just going to start explaining away, and I won't even know that I'm doing it.
It's just your habit, and it's who you are. I know a few people that come to mind, like as you're saying this, that the response to every statement you say is yeah but, and they have an explanation for everything, but did you think about this? And I mean, it's a great evening with a bottle of wine to go through all of these sort of scenarios in our head. But, you know, at some point, it depends on who I'm speaking to. I'm like, all right, I get your theory. That's good. But would you say, as a professor, how do you teach philosophy? How is that taught? Do you just do you just guide people to question everything, or how do you teach that? I'm trying to remember my college days, but it was a bit ago, so I can't really necessarily remember that class. But how do you guide your students through that?
Well, I mean, philosophy just encourages you to ask these kind of questions, you know, questioning the stuff that you ordinarily take for granted, that you might have a lot invested in. It's encouraging you to just take a step back and just say, hang on a minute, is there any good reason to think that that's true, or what about these reasons for thinking that it's not true? So that's important. The thing is that when people have signed up to a belief system and have invested a lot in it, they very often are ready for you. It's a bit like arguing with somebody that's phoned you up and is trying to sell you double glazing or something. You know what I mean? Where whatever question you ask, whatever point you make, they've already got an answer written down in front of them. They've got a kind of a script,
Right.
and they're going to tie you up in knots. So if you ever actually argue with a young Earth creationist, for example, unless you're very up on the moves, they're going to tie you up in knots pretty quickly. I mean, people who are very intelligent, educated people can be made to look quite foolish by young Earth creationists if they're not sort of wary of what the techniques are. So for that reason, I think the best strategy, and I think this is the one I've been using more than any other really, is analogy. So by that I mean, what you do is you get them to forget about what they believe in, but to look over there at what those people over there believe in. And what those people over there believe in is pretty ludicrous. You know, they're 9/11 truthers or flat earthers or whatever it might happen to be. Okay, so we're on the same page. We both agree that those people over there are pretty irrational. And then you kind of investigate, well, why are they irrational? What do they do? What are they doing that's leading them astray there? And you kind of unpack that a bit. And then, and only then, do you go, and what about what? So can you explain to me why you're not doing the exact same thing that they're doing over there? What's the difference? Now they're in trouble very often.
Right.
Whereas if you just come at them straight ahead with, but here's my evidence against what you believe, they've got the script ready. They're ready for you. They're going to shoot each of these things down, tie you up in knots very rapidly. So I think that exposing people to, or getting people to think about a whole range of wacky beliefs is really good, actually, because it makes you much more likely to spot the wackiness in your own beliefs, you know? Yeah. So, and religious people are often really hate it when you say, oh, let's start thinking about, belief in Santa Claus or fairies or alien abduction. They say they get outraged and they say, how very dare you that you should compare my belief in God and Jesus and so on with believing in Santa Claus. I mean, this is ludicrous. Just go away. I don't want to listen to. One of the reasons that they're doing that is that actually this is a very effective technique, getting people to think about why these other belief systems are kind of nutty and what's gone wrong. Makes it much more likely that they're going to find that they're actually engaging in many of the same kind of techniques. So that would be my number one strategy, which I've employed against belief in God. Actually, I wrote a paper called The Evil God Challenge, which does this. And if anyone's interested, I turned it into a 3-minute cartoon, which you can watch on Vimeo.
Okay.
Look up The Evil God Challenge. It's on Vimeo. It takes 3 minutes. It's an analogy that I use that's since become quite sort of notorious. So it's a nice example of how you can do it.
We'll make sure to add that link for you so that
Thank you. Yeah.
people can go check that out. We'll do the same thing with everything you've written. We'll just add it to the comments and people can explore on their own, because I personally think I agree. It's part of critical thinking. I think it's important to, again, and I don't know if question is a right word to use, but just why not question? I guess is the right word, right? I'm just that why person. Why?
Yeah.
Can you expand? Can you expand? Can you explain that a little more? I'm just very, very curious person, but I'm very, I guess, quiet about my own philosophies. I've just learned to shut people out when in explaining things, because I don't feel like going into combat with certain people. I guess do you do that as well? Are there certain, I mean, you mentioned you had very strong political views, right?
Fairly
Do
strong.
you?
Well, from the
No?
perspective of an American, I probably seem like some sort of lunatic Marxist swivel-eyed, you know.
Nah. Why is
But
that? I wouldn't have
well,
you on
because
the
I mean,
show.
I because I think that the state should fund free healthcare, free
Okay.
university. I mean, we have many of these things in Western Europe,
Hmm.
and we can afford them. And if you get sick, seriously, you don't go bankrupt.
Right.
And you can go to university and you don't end up paying off ludicrous debts that you've
Right.
amassed.
Right.
These things are, we have decent social care.
Hmm.
So these are bog standard things in many countries around the world.
Hmm.
And I can see that in the UK we're losing them rapidly, and in the UK
Oh.
and in the US you've never had them. And I think you should have them. I think these things are important. So yeah, I do care about that stuff. But why am I talking about this now? I've forgotten. What did you ask
Oh,
me?
you mentioned that you had strong political views, but I'm not sure if that leads to sort of a challenging conversation sometimes, and how you handle. I mean, there are certain views that I have that I'm like very conscious who I have them with,
Yeah,
um,
there are.
because
Yeah, people
I'm
always
I'm
say,
open to different views. I'm definitely open to different
yeah,
views. I do like listening. Um, but there are certain people that I'm like, this, it's not worth having this conversation with them. I'm
no,
not saying that about you. I'm just
no,
pivoting on, you mentioned having strong political views, and does
yeah.
that lead to sort of, do you like having difficult conversations about it, or are
Yeah,
you just like, I'm not
I,
going to
I'm
talk to
one of
this
these
person about it?
people. Yeah, I'm one
Yeah.
of these people where if you say to people, if you say to me, well, you can't say that, then I'll start yelling it from. I
Oh
can't
yeah.
help it. I'm just
Hmm.
one of them.
Hmm.
Um, so when it comes to politics, there are certain areas, certain topics which many people are wary about talking about
Hmm.
because it's risky,
Hmm.
potentially really seriously risky, even to your career,
Okay.
were you to express certain views. So
Right.
hot topics are the trans issues. It's just incredibly toxic, that whole environment now, to the point where you say anything at all and somebody's going to point a finger and say you're a bigot, or we're no platforming you, or you should lose your job,
Hmm.
Israel Palestine, another
Hmm.
another example. People will not talk about it because they're
Hmm.
terrified of what will happen
Right.
to them if they express
Right.
any kind of view at all. Um, and I think I fully understand that,
Hmm.
but I think it's a mistake. And the more people hide under their desk, refuse to put their head up, refuse to say anything, the
Hmm.
harder it makes it for anyone else. To the point
Right.
where anyone that puts their head above the parapet, they just get picked off.
Hmm.
So I think that in terms of free speech, which America is supposed to be the land of free speech and free expression, it's a real shame that actually there are things you can't really talk about, and
Hmm.
people are rightly afraid of talking about, and that seems to be happening more and more now. It's quite, it's kind of
Hmm.
disturbing. Both
Right.
left and right, it happens on both sides.
It is important to have conversations. I think for me specifically, I like to listen. I'm more of an observer. I like to
Yeah.
listen. I like to observe. I'm very reflective. I'll go back, I'll think about things and what have you.
Mhm.
But there are, it's not necessarily the topic as much as it's the personality that I'm like,
Right.
I don't have the energy for this person right now.
Yeah.
And that can change, right? It may just be the day where I'm like, okay, I can't with this person right now. But
Yeah.
but I'm definitely more of the observer, the listener.
Yeah. That's
this whole
okay.
podcast is about listening to people.
Yeah,
And
you can. Well, you may just not be sure what your view is. You can be kind of like Socrates. The guy who said that if I know anything, I know nothing. But he went around asking lots of really awkward questions to the
Mhm.
point where people got so irritated with him. What he would do is he'd go to the judge and say, "What is justice?" And the justice would say, "I know what it is. It's this." And then Socrates would proceed to come up with counterexamples and start teasing apart. And it turns out that the judge didn't know what justice is, apparently. And similarly, he would ask the general, "What is courage?" And the same thing would
Mhm.
happen. And eventually, they just got so cheesed off with him that well, they condemned him to death. Accused him of corrupting the youth, and he was forced to drink hemlock
Yeah.
and died. So yeah, um, yeah. Sometimes it's very dangerous to go around asking a lot of awkward questions. You will certainly irritate a lot of people. Sometimes it's just not worth it. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes there's an opportunity for me to talk about God or something with some religious person,
Mhm.
and I just think to myself, no, this is a waste of
Because
time.
there are some people whose mind you just, I don't know that you want to change, but you can't challenge them, right? They're so, or they'll even say
Mm.
the Bible says so. It's right
Yeah,
there. It's right there. Like there's it's right there. It's written. It's like, well,
yeah,
who wrote it? Who wrote that?
yeah.
You know?
So you could sow a seed. You could sow a seed. You don't. They're not going to go. Oh, what a fool I've been. You've got me there. I've been changing my mind.
Hmm.
That's not going to happen. People come out of religion slowly. The research suggests they go in fairly quick, about 3 months. Come out very slow, years usually.
Oh,
Um, and usually, well, this is self-reporting, so it's difficult to know exactly how reliable this is. But it's sort of intellectual reasons. They've started thinking and criticizing and asking themselves difficult questions, and that
hmm,
other people, they've come into contact with other people that have asked them questions, and they've started to realize that they don't have answers or don't have adequate answers and so on. But it takes a
hmm.
long time, so don't expect a quick result. But it may be
Right.
that you are just putting in a little bit more grit into the machinery, so that eventually it'll break and they'll be free.
Right.
It's not going to
Right.
happen instantaneously, but you're still contributing something. But now I'm intrigued to know, and I don't want to pressure you, but give me just a ballpark, impression of what it is that you're not happy about talking about, because it would be.
What am I not happy talking about? Like, I mean, I don't know if it goes back to what I'd said earlier, but truly, I do talk about just about anything. Um, if I don't want to talk about it, it's usually going to be a personality whose mind there's no changing, right?
Okay,
But
so it's not the subject
generally,
matter. Yeah, it's the
pardon?
person, not the subject matter. It's the
Right.
person, not the subject matter. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I feel like
yeah.
everything in life is that, like, even at when you have a job, right? It's never the work, always the people. I've always said that. I've been in
Mm.
leadership, I don't know, I've been in practice for over 25 years, been in leadership probably 20 of those years, and it was never the work and always the people. Maybe I don't like people very much. No, that's not true. I really like people. Um, what don't I like talking about? I would say I would say political is probably where I draw the line. Just
Yeah.
because, especially in today's environment, it just seems that there aren't many people you can have the discussion with, kind of what you were saying. You want to just like hide under your desk type thing,
Mm.
because I I I I almost can't believe, how judgmental people have become about political beliefs. It's just
Mm.
your beliefs. And I also believe that you can have a hybrid of beliefs, just like with religion, right?
Right.
I love Buddhism, but I was raised Christian, and I like my Christian beliefs. But I you have a brain to come up with your own philosophies and theories, and it can be a combination of everything you've heard in the world. I feel the same way about politics, right? Like there isn't any sort of hard line for me. Uh,
Mm.
just to do things, some people don't know how to have that conversation. Like
Yeah.
there's there's just no, um, either getting through or saying, I really don't want to talk about this anymore. And if you say, I don't want to talk about it, what do you mean? But how can you see things the way that you see them? And I'm like, I mean, that's literally just, I see them the way that I see them.
Mm.
Again, I'll listen, but if it's going to become combative, I'm like, depends on the person. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah,
But
you
what
talk,
I,
yeah, politics. Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it is a classic area.
yeah,
I think people used to say that, when it comes to dinner party conversation, the two things you never talk about are politics and religion. Um,
and
and,
sex.
yeah, yeah, obviously that, yeah.
Hmm.
And that's
That's
because,
how I was raised. Those are the
yeah,
three things you don't talk about.
we don't talk about, yeah, and certainly
Yeah.
politics and religion, these are things where people get super entrenched,
Mm-hmm.
super invested, so that if you
Right.
do say something, it's almost like a personal attack. It's their
Sure.
identity that you're
Mm-hmm.
attacking, not just some belief.
Right.
And so, I can fully understand why people want to skirt around that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
just takes me back to even when I was a child that it's just like, why? Everything was like, no answer satisfied me until it was like, that's it. I said so. I feel that in politics and religion, the same thing happens.
Yeah.
When you can no longer continue to go, like in your dog experience, in your dog example, when people will just say, it's in the Constitution or it's in the Bible. And
Hmm.
that's it. Like, that's where the conversation ends. So I kind of let it end there too.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
We're just don't go any further.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
So, Stephen, where can we find you?
Well, physically, I'm located in Oxford in the
Okay.
UK.
So by plane
Um,
for the most part.
yeah, I'm on some social media. So I'm on
Okay.
Twitter/X.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find my various things from pictures of climbing to political rants, really, on Stephen with a PH, Stephen Law 60, because that's when I was born.
Okay.
Um, and then I'm on the Blue Sky one. I think it's the same, something that you find me easily. And then I've got a blog at stephenlaw.org, O-R-G, I think it is. Yeah. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you can find me in those places. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. And we can find your books and everything you've written besides the blog. We can find all of that on your website as well.
I think there are some links to that on the website. Yeah, but if you just go on Amazon or whatever your preferred
Mm-hmm.
bookstore is and look up my name, you'll see a list of books that I've published over the years. Yeah, but the ones I would recommend probably are so there's one called Believing Bullshit, which obviously relates to what we've been talking here.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like
Yeah,
something I'd say. Okay.
yeah, Believing Bullshit. How not
Mm-hmm.
to fall into an intellectual black hole is Believing Bullshit. And then another one is called the Philosophy Gym: 25 Short Adventures in Thinking. I think I really like that one still, even though it's getting on a bit. That's good fun. Um, and then the Complete Philosophy Files is suitable for kids, 11, 10, 11 up to, and adults read it as well. It's, yeah, those are the ones I would point to. And then if you want stuff on sort of um, atheism and humanism, which I've also written on, there are these little books called Very Short Introductions, published by Cambridge University Press.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote the Very Short Introduction to Humanism.
Okay.
So if people are interested in sort of, I think in America you call it secular humanism. So if you're interested in sort of alternative worldview, non-religious worldviews, that's kind of one that I'm interested in as well. And I wrote a book on that. But yeah, I'd recommend the Philosophy Gym and Believing Bullshit.
Would in that order?
Yeah, Philosophy Gym is probably uh, one. It's a lot of. I was intended to be a lot of fun. Big questions, short little essays. A lot of them are dialogues. Some of them are a bit cheeky. So there's one called "What's Wrong with Gay Sex," for example, which is a dialogue between God and an
Okay.
evangelical Christian, and it's kind of, it's a bit knockabout, but it goes through the main philosophical arguments, but in a kind of fairly entertaining, I hope, way. That book, weirdly, won a prize. There's a town in Bavaria called Mindelheim, and the kids at the local school set up with the judges for this new book prize, and they chose my book, so I got to go to Mindelheim in Bavaria, where they wandered around the town with balloons with my thoughts written on them on the ends of sticks, and I was kind of, I was fated in. I was big in Bavaria for a day. It was very weird. But what was weirdest about it was that the sub-bishop of Augsburg gave me the prize in a nunnery. Why? Because they obviously hadn't read the book.
I was going to say, were they not familiar with its substance?
They obviously hadn't read it. They had no idea what was in that book. But the kids had read it and they liked it, so they so the book was awarded the prize.
Well, congratulations on that.
Yeah.
I've never had my day in Bavaria, so
It's a lovely place. Yeah.
it's a lovely place.
Very Catholic, pretty
I would
right wing, very conservative, lots of lederhosen and dirndls and, all the outfits they were wearing. And the best thing about that trip for me was that as a child, I watched the film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang
Okay.
with Dick Van Dyke.
Yes.
And in that film, they go in the flying car to a castle in a fictional country called Bulgaria. And that castle exists, and it's in Bavaria, and it's called Neuschwanstein. And I got to visit Neuschwanstein castle while I was in Bavaria. That was the high point for me, actually.
Really, not having your own day was not
that was,
the highlight?
I'm always slightly embarrassed about things like that. It was great, and it was really great seeing all the kids.
Yeah.
And there was even a band in the town square. It was just astonishing.
That's amazing. What is it? You don't like that kind of attention?
Well, it's just I feel slightly cringy about it.
But you're cringy about the attention, or you're cringy? What part of it's cringy?
Really, no one merits that sort of, certainly not me, that sort of adulation. So yeah, I just felt slightly embarrassed by the whole thing. But yeah, Neuschwanstein Castle, look it up. It's an amazing place.
Thanks for your interest in sticking around to watch or listen to my podcast, dedicated to providing tools and resources to help you claim and live your best life. If you're loving these conversations, make sure you hit that bell to subscribe or follow and never miss an episode of the Chris Senise Podcast. Don't forget to tap the like and share it with someone who needs a little inspiration today. Let's grow this community of curious, driven minds together.